we are back on The World today. We're going to be sticking to various defense issues, but we're going to actually focus on President Biden's visit to Europe, and specifically France. We're going to bring in a guest to discuss that state visit.
Milan Lelich is joining us, political observer at RBC. Thank you for joining us today. Sorry about the slow start there.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yes, now President Joe Biden is actually paying his first state visit as president of the United States to France, which is kind of surprising based on the fact that the elections are just around the corner of the American presidential elections. But in terms of Ukraine, you know, President Zelensky is going to be there for these D-Day commemorations, and I'm absolutely positive they're going to talk about Ukraine and the security situation in Europe. So in terms of Ukraine, what do you think is going to be discussed there? And what can President Zelensky look forward to?
Well, the number one issue is very obvious, and it basically remains the same for these 2+ years of the full-scale Russian invasion. This is weaponry, more and more of a weaponry, in particular artillery shells and air defense. These are the issues that we really badly need in Ukraine, and will need it for months and months to come. This is also obvious, but I think also in other policy spheres may be discussed and will probably be discussed, in particular the usage of Russian frozen assets and how to transfer the money from them to Ukraine, improving our defense and our macroeconomic stability, as well as the US has announced its plan of providing us a loan in about like $50+ billion, which is a pretty good sum of money that will be well enough for us to keep running our economy for quite a while. And also I think that the issue of the US allowing us to, our armed forces to attack military targets on the Russian territory. There is significant process in this sphere in the course of like several last days and a couple of last weeks, but still, I think some issues need to be debated. In particular, the US still does not allow Ukrainian armed forces to use highly effective ATACMS missiles against their targets on the Russian sovereign territory. I think that our President Zelensky will definitely ask about this. And also there are a lot of other issues like preparations for the peace summit in Switzerland, which be, I think, a major geopolitical event next week. We know that President Biden, unfortunately, has chosen to spend this time. The 15th, 16th of June, he'll be in California, somewhere there, on an event which is a part of his presidential campaign. But I think that President Zelensky will desperately ask him again to take part personally in this summit in Bürgenstock in Switzerland. And also there are some last but not the least, the issue of protecting the air over the western Ukraine from the NATO territory, basically from Poland. This is also what we really ask our NATO partners to do, but still there are debates, but there is no final decision. And everyone understands that if the US says yes, then I think many nations will follow.
Right. I just wanted to mention one thing. I asked Minister Sikorski about that last Friday in Prague at that Foreign Ministers NATO summit. And he said there are no such plans to defend the Western Ukrainian skies at this point, which I think is absolutely a shame. But perhaps there in France that'll be discussed, and maybe we'll get an answer from that.
Just to follow up on that peace summit, as of right now, we know that President Biden won't be attending. But from your perspective, what do you think the impact of not having President Biden will be? Because, as we know at this stage, it's actually the US who foots most of that bill when it comes to military aid for Ukraine.
Surely this is a heavy, President Biden's possible absence at this summit is a very huge diplomatical blow to all the efforts that President Zelensky and his team has done in preparations for this summit, because with all the full respect to Vice President Harris and to National Security Advisor Sullivan, they are not the president of the US, and the world looks at the president of the United States. If he attends this or that event, this is a very clear signal, a very clear message to scores of countries all over the world that this is something worth visiting. If the if the president of the United States prefers to spend this time campaigning, doing another important things, obviously, but still not being present himself physically at the summit, that I think it is also a signal for many nations that maybe this is not worth visiting. Maybe if the US is not there, if Biden is not there, why for us to be? I think that many nations, unfortunately, will think this way. So I think that the chances are still there, but they are really minimal, because we have already had an official announcement from the White House that Harris and Sullivan are going to be there, not Biden. But still, maybe Zelensky will try to persuade Biden to change his plans, because the US president obviously has full power over his own schedule, and he's the one to choose whether to be in California or Switzerland next weekend.
Well,
so
Milan,
the chances...
That was very diplomatic of you. You know, some critics say that by sending Vice President Kamala Harris and then, of course, Jake Sullivan, that those are probably two of the most inept members of the administration. And actually, that's more telling that Biden believes that maybe not much will come out of the summit.
Yeah, probably. And I also have read multiple stories that, okay, if Biden is not there, then probably Secretary Blinken should be there, because Secretary Blinken is considered to be much more hawkish, I mean positively hawkish, against Russia and pro-Ukraine. He is the one who definitely supported that the US allow us to strike legitimate military targets on the Russian soil, which which Advisor Sullivan was clearly against. But okay, we have what we have. We cannot dictate the US what to do and whom to send to the summit. But again, I reiterate my message that it is a very heavy blow to all the diplomatic efforts by Zelensky's team since 2022 for almost 2 years. To collect as many top world leaders at this initial summit as possible. And if the Biden's not there, then I think that many other people will opt not, leaders of other nations will opt not to visit it also, but instead send some, I don't know, prime ministers, heads of MFA, or diplomatic advisors, or ambassadors, or on somebody else, but not the first gentlemen and not the first ladies of the nations. So I think it's maybe too early to talk about the possible outcome of the summit. I hope we'll have another opportunity to discuss it closer to the date, but still the chances to have something really strong and significant after President Biden's decision not to be present, they clearly diminish. This is the fact.
But I think we know that President Biden's state visit to France is not just focused on Ukraine, but it also is shaping up his presidential campaign. So all eyes are on him as well. What do you think the impact of this state visit will be on his campaign for the presidential elections that are coming up?
Well, it all definitely depends on the messages that Biden will give in his tomorrow's speech that has already been announced in all other official communications, whatever it will be, like press conference, briefing, statement, something else. We'll see. But as far as I understand the American politics, the issue of the foreign policy has never been on the top of the agenda for American voters. Yes, it is there. It is definitely in top 10. Earlier, these were the issues of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now this is Ukraine and situation in the sector of Gaza, obviously. But still, according to all the polls that I have seen, the issues of migrations, gun control, and so on are really much more important for the voters there in the US than the issues of, some bilateral communications with French counterparts or President Zelensky, President Macron, or whoever else. But it all clearly depends on the messages, because President Biden is free not to talk only about geopoliticals and war in Ukraine, but also to give certain remarks on, for example, recent legal troubles of his main rival, Donald Trump, and to comment on the Trump statements and so on, which will have a big effect back on the U.S. soil, back for the domestic U.S. voters.
Certainly. Well, Milan Lelich, political observer, RBC, Ukraine, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.